Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, whatever time it is in your time zone. Welcome to another webinar of the Agora webinar series. It's the 5th since we started on 9th of April. And we started with a Germany topic, took the European view, looked at the North Sea, and today we're going to see what's happening in Asia, more precisely in Indonesia. And the webinar's title is How Renewable Energy Can Power Indonesia. And just so that you know who we are, Agora Energiewende is an independent think tank financed by two foundations. We try to make the energy transition a success, or we try helping to make the energy transition a success. And currently we are some 45 colleagues working here, mainly in Berlin, some of us in Brussels and Austria and also China. On the panel, you can see Mentari Pujantoro, who works for the Team International of Agora Energiewende. She's project manager, international energy transitions. We have Agus Tampu Bulan, who is researcher at the Institute for Essential Services Reform, IESR in Jakarta, Indonesia. There's also Janata Givankara. We'll later on call him Egi. He's an energy transformation program manager at the IESR. And whilst Mentari and Agus will do the presentation, Egi will be there for the Q&A session later on. And there's also Janne Görlach, who's trainee at the communications department of Agora Energiewende. My name is Nicola Bock. I'm the head of events at Agora Energiewende. Now, what's going to happen during the next hour until noon in Central European summertime, we will have a presentation for around 25 minutes, and then we will have time for your questions, and we'll have a little Q&A session at the end. We do have a poll here and there, and even though I can only see numbers, we're currently looking at some 112 participants, but there's still some movement, so I anticipate there'll be even more in the course of the webinar. We cannot see you, but of course there are ways to interact with us. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you see two buttons. One is chat and the other one is Q&A or F&A for Fragen und Antworten in German. It would be great if you use the chat window for any technical issues that you may face. So if you have a problem with hearing us, or if your screen is frozen or something, put these questions or remarks in there so we can take care of them. We will also use this, the chat, in order to inform you about relevant links. We have already uploaded the presentation to our website, and Janne, I believe, is already sharing the link to the presentation in the chat. There is also a general email address. If you have any comments or remarks, just use webinar@agora-energiewende.de, and we will add a few more links in the course of the webinar that are of relevance. For your content-related questions, so anything that comes up to your mind when Mentari and Agus are presenting, please do use the Q&A window for this. So we will have a look at those, and then if we have, I can imagine there will be more questions than we will actually be able to answer. So we will pick the ones that we deem most interesting for the majority of the attendees and read them. Janne will then read them out to Agus, Egi, and Mentari. Once we pick a question to be answered, it will become visible to the audience. So that brings me to the next point. We are recording the webinar again, and I hope this time it's not going to be me being shown all the time. That happened last time because apparently I hit a wrong button. So this time I hope that the people presenting will actually be shown. We are recording, so in case you do not want to leave any footprints, you should refrain from putting any questions into the Q&A section because, as I said, they may become visible and public. Right, I think that's it from the housekeeping side. Before I now hand over to Mentari to start the presentation, I already announced we do have a few polls for you. So I will start it because it would be interesting for us to get to know you a little better. So I will make the first poll on your background. So you should see the window now. I will still read it out loud because the recording doesn't show the polls. So my background is A, energy industry, B, policy government, C, finance economy, D, non-energy related. That's the first question. And then we have a second one to find out where people actually from where they've tuned in. I come from A, Indonesia, B, Asia, other, C, Germany, D, Europe, other, so non-Germany, and E, other parts of the world. And you will be able to see the results in a second. I just need to wait until everyone has voted. And I think I'll give it another 3 seconds. And I will now finish the poll and make it visible to you. So, surprise, surprise, we have 51% people from the energy industry, followed by 23% non-energy related, and then followed by 20% of policy government people, and a minority, I would say, of 5% coming from the finance economy sector. That's on the professional background. And then where do people come from? Wow, more than half of them, 54% from Indonesia. So you did a good marketing job there. IESR, followed by Germany. So apparently we did something right as well, 21%. Then we have 16% from the rest of Europe, and 7% from the rest of Asia, and 2% from other parts of the world. So maybe someone from South America, Australia, or Africa, what have you. Right, thank you for this. I hope this gives Mentari and Argus a fair idea about who's actually watching. I will finish the poll and hand over to Mentari.
Thank you, Nicola. So yeah, thank you for being here. Good afternoon, good morning to our listeners from Europe, and selamat sore for our listeners in Indonesia. So happy to have you here. In this opportunity, Agora and IESR, we would like to present to you how renewable energy can power Indonesia. But before that, maybe a little bit about Agora. Some of you hopefully know about Agora from our work independent energy transformation in Germany and in Europe. But since a couple years ago, we started working more internationally. And among other parts of the world, one of the key regions that we are looking at is Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is obviously a very important region. The energy influence is growing. It's home to 1 out of 10 people in the world. There is urbanization and industrialization ongoing. And Indonesia especially is one of the largest emerging economy in Southeast Asia. It has very unique challenge. There are more than 260 million people in Indonesia. There's growing energy demands. It's mix of island system as well as large island continental systems. So there are challenges that Indonesia is facing, which are obviously, you know, common challenge that other country in the world also facing in terms of energy transition. And with this in mind, we often also talk when we discuss that if Indonesia can do its energy transition, then it means other countries can also do it. And in our work in Indonesia, we are partnering with the Institute of Essential Services Reform, or IESR. And I'm happy to have Agus Tampubolon here. He is the power system expert from IESR. And in the next minute, he will explain to you a brief introduction of Indonesian power system. And then me and Agus will continue by explaining the result of our joint study of roadmap of Indonesian power sector. So I'll start sharing the screen here. And let's see. Agus, I would like to hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Untari. Let me try. So, I can do next. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Untari have said, my name is Agus Tampubolon. I'm a researcher at Institute for Essential Services Reform, a think tank based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Last year, Agora and IESR and also Monash University conducted a joint study looking at how we can power Indonesian, particularly Java, Bali, and Sumatra with higher share of renewables. That is the study that we wanted to present to you at this opportunity. Before we going deep into the study, first I would like to introduce or present to you the Indonesian power system, the overview of it. Talking about the power system in Indonesia, first I would like to present about the utility that provides electricity. In Indonesia, we have PLN as the national owned utility and also as the largest utility. PLN has the largest power plant fleets in terms of generation and also owns almost all transmission and distribution lines in the country. Every year, PLN, in doing their business, publish an electricity supply business plan, or RUPTL as we call it in Indonesia, for the period of 10 years. The current RUPTL that we have was published last year in February, is RUPTL 2019 until 2028. This RUPTL should be based on the national energy planning that we have and also the national electricity planning. Looking deeper at the national energy planning, in Indonesia we have set a renewables target of 23% in the primary energy mix by 2025. What does it mean actually in terms of installed capacity? That means 45.2 gigawatts of renewables installed capacity should be installed in Indonesia by 2025. If you look at 2019, that means we need to have, sorry for that. In 2019, it means we need to have 10.2 gigawatt installed capacity. However, the data that we have has shown that 2019 in Indonesia, we only have 10.2 out of 13.9 targeted installed capacity. That means we are still lagging behind the target. And with a span of 5 years until 2025, that means Indonesia needs to build at least 5 to 6 gigawatts of renewables every year. In terms of average, renewables accounted to 15.2% of the total installed capacity from 2015 to 2019. And if we look deeper at the renewables capacity that we have in Indonesia, we can see on the curve here that hydropower, mining hydro are the most installed capacity in Indonesia, followed by geothermal and bioenergy. Unfortunately, solar and wind shares are still very small in Indonesia. And in terms of generation share, it is also the same. It is quite stagnant at 12.2% since 2011. Talking about Indonesia, we need to understand that Indonesia is an archipelago. That means we have thousands of islands. And also we have around 38 electrical systems, either a big system or small system. On the main islands, namely Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Papua, we have either 1 or 2 big electrical systems. Java and Bali is interconnected with a 400 megawatt sea cable, and it is planned to be increased to 2 gigawatts due to the due to the increase of demand from Bali. Java and Sumatra, currently there is no interconnection between the two main islands, but there is a plan to interconnect them both in 2024 with a capacity of 3 gigawatts. I also highlighted some of the renewables that we have in Indonesian projects. For example, we have a Sidrap wind power plant with a capacity of 75 megawatts, inaugurated in 2018, located in South Sulawesi, becomes the largest commercial wind power plant that we have in Indonesia so far. And then about the PV, we have here Sirata floating PV in West Java with a planned capacity 145 megawatt peak, and it is planned to be installed in 2021. Sumatra, Java, and Bali becomes important in our study because almost 90% of the electricity demand in Indonesia located in these three big islands. As you can see from the right side, Java, Bali demand followed by Sumatra are the highest. Meanwhile, Central Indonesia is Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and East Indonesia shares for the electricity demands are really low. Residential and commercial, or we categorize them as a building sector here, consume more than 60% of the total electricity generation in Indonesia. Indonesian population will grow at 0.7% annually from 2020 until 2045, according to the National Agency Statistic, BPS. And around 64% will be urban. That means that will contribute significantly in the future to the electricity demand growth in Indonesia. Having this in mind, if you look at the right side, in the current RUPTL, we still see that almost 50% plant install capacity in the next 10 years are still coal-fired power plants, followed by gas-fired power plants. That means 39 of the 56 plant capacity for the next 10 years are still fossil fuel power plants, so less of renewables. That becomes the reason why we did the study that we did last year to see whether it's possible for us to increase the share of renewables particularly in Java, Bali, and Sumatra system. Now I will hand over back to Monash.
Thank you, Agus. Thanks a lot for the brief introduction of Indonesia power system. As Agus has already mentioned, it is quite a pity that the growing demand of Indonesia are still expected to be filled by fossil fuels energy. At least this is a scenario from the utility. So we as a think tank would like to assess other scenarios, which basically why we go into this analysis of how renewable energy can power Java, Bali, and Sumatra. So the setup of the study, this is a study of Agora, IESR, as well as Monash University in Australia since 2018, and we launched this in 2019. This is a modeling exercise using Plexos from Energy Exemplar. And in this study, we use RUPTL 2018 at that time as a baseline. And in our exercise, we model in a 10-year time span for the period of 2018 to 2027. And this is with hourly time steps. We take into account supply and demand on provincial level, as well as interprovincial transmission capacity restrictions. And yeah, this is the picture of our study in your slides. So the setup of the study. In this study, we basically are interested into two aspects, one of the demand side and the other is the supply side, which basically renewables. And the objective of the study is, one, on the demand side, is to identify the impact of reduced demand on investment, utilization, and power system costs. So we have two different demand levels. One is RUPTL scenario, which is quite a high energy demand projection. And the other scenario is basically this RUPTL low gen and RUPTL low cap, which has a more moderate energy demand projection. And from the renewable energy share aspects, we would like to assess what is actually the impact of adding considerable shares of wind and solar capacity to the system. And here we have several scenarios. One is RUPTL as a baseline, and the other scenarios, so-called RE medium, is basically the new capacity build is open, so the model can choose between fossil fuels and renewables. And for the RE high and energy transition scenario, we let the model to only choose renewable as an option for new capacity build. So in the next slides, I will present to you what are the 5 key insights that we found from this study. First is about the demand. So the first insight is basically the past and current electricity plan has always overestimated the electricity demand in Java, Bali, and Sumatra. You can see from your slides here that there are some lines with different color. This is depicting the projection from RUPTL from 2008 to 2018. And the black line is basically the actual energy, electricity consumption, which happened in Java, Bali, and Sumatra. So you can clearly see that the projection of the PLN is not meeting the actual energy consumption in the year. So this is why in our study, we projected the consumption of an electricity following the historical trend line. In this case, for Java Bali, we project around 5% of electricity growth per year. And in Sumatra, it's around 7.2% of electricity growth per year. Well, this is something, I mean, overestimating demand growth is something that often happens in developing countries because of the expectation of the growth. But what is actually the impact of doing this? So we found that this, as well as underestimating the potential of energy efficiency, it will increase the risk of stranded assets. You can see in this picture, we compare 2 scenarios. One is RUPTL, and the other one is using the same technology options as in RUPTL, but with the lower demand, which is our projection of 5% instead of around 7 and 9% of electricity demand in Java, Bali, and Sumatra. And we found that there are actually 13 gigawatts of power plants that are unnecessary to be built to meet the demand. And this also means around 12.7 billion US dollar of unnecessary investment that can be used for other investment. If we go for more detail into the power plant level, on the right-hand side, you can see these pictures of bubbles. Basically, each bubbles represent a power plant with the size. The larger the bubble means larger the capacity of the power plant. And this also means that overestimating demand growth, it will change how much the power plant will be used. And still, this is excluding the impact of higher renewable generation. Some power plants, especially the power plants that are still under construction and planned, have a lower utilization rate by around minus 10 to 20%. And this lower utilization basically means also higher risk of stranded assets for those power plants. So that's from the fossil fuel side, and we are looking now into the renewable side. I think it's a common knowledge Indonesia has diverse renewable sources, and it easily, I think, allow for doubling renewable share. As Agus has mentioned, the government has target of 23% of renewables in primary energy, and we assess is government actually going to reach the target of 23% or even more in the power sector. So you can see in this line of the BAU, or the business as usual, from our modeling, it only reached to 19%. So it's not reaching the target basically, especially if the government only look at the blue here is hydro and the green is geothermal and biomass. So basically, if the government looking beyond these technologies and acknowledging as well wind and solar, as you can see in the other chart, the government may be able to reach even more and higher share of renewables. So in the high scenario, we projected around 35 gigawatt of solar in Java, Bali, and Sumatra, and 19 gigawatt of wind in those islands. And this is actually not using all of the potential that's available in the country itself. Moving on to the next insights. Often people ask, when we say, yeah, let's install solar and wind, they ask, oh, what about the cost? Because it is an expensive technology, or deemed as an expensive technology. So we found that actually higher renewable deployment enable Indonesia to reach its climate goal with lower cost. So due to higher non-thermal output, the emission intensity in higher renewable scenario actually will go down. In the medium scenario, it go down by 16%, and the high renewable scenario, it's go down by 36% compared to RUBPL. And cost-wise, the higher renewable scenario in this side is actually could result in a cost saving of around 10 billion US dollar over 10 years. And this is a result of saving in O&M costs as well as a generation cost. And it is, I think, a common knowledge as well that renewables, and you can see from here is the green bar. This is basically the investment cost, capex, and renewable scenario obviously have a higher investment cost because it is upfront investment is more intensive compared to the other technology. So this is why we highlighted that conducive investment environment is key to enabling higher renewable penetration and reducing overall cost. Moving to the next one, often people also ask with a scenario when there's a lot of high wind and solar, they ask, what about the security of supply? Because wind and solar is a variable energy source. It's only available when the wind and solar is there. So we assess these aspects also to some extent in our study. And we found that even with the high share, the security of supply system of Indonesian power system still can be guaranteed. So we look at two examples, sample week with high wind and solar in this week of around October 2027, and other sample week with low solar and wind. And in especially the high wind and solar week, the solar and wind can reach almost 60% of energy demand. And this fluctuation was compensated by a flexible operation of the residual power plant. The residual power plant are those above the wind and solar, so this color, coal and gas turbine. And that we assess that the flexible power plant or the coal power plant can operate flexibly is around 1% of their nameplate capacity. So this is something that is very, very feasible in technical point of view. So what is it means in terms of policy recommendation? We have these 5 key insights that we think is very important to put forward but what does it mean in terms of translating these key insights to policy? So with this in mind, I will hand over to Agus to explain to you about the key insights and policy recommendations. But before that, I think, Nicola, we would like to pull another poll.
Yes, correct. I will just call upon the second poll, which is about major challenges and barriers. I will make it visible for you. The question is, in your opinion, what is the major challenge or barrier for Indonesia to increase the renewable shares? A, less incorporation of renewables in Indonesia's energy planning, i.e. RUPTL. B, high coal reserves and installed capacity. C, no attractive incentives and feed-in tariff scheme for renewables. D, the renewable cost is not competitive compared to coal. E, unstable regulatory conditions and no clear governmental direction. And the last one, F, other reasons. And I can see people are voting. Obviously, it takes a little longer than the first polls with the question, where are you from and what's your background? People are still voting, so I will give it a few more seconds. And now it looks like everyone has made up his or her own mind, so I will finish the poll and make it visible to everyone. So there's a clear lead of answer E, unstable regulatory conditions and no clear governmental direction, and which was voted by 47%. All others have 16 or less percent with the answers. So Mentari, I will close here and give back. No, hang on. I will hand back to Argus, and he can tell us about the recommendations.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you also, Mentari, for the presentation about our joint study. And thank you, everyone, for conducting the poll with us. It is actually, as we expected, that unstable policy, changing regulation is also one of the main reasons for the low shares of renewables in Indonesia that we will try to also tackle with our recommendation. So the first two recommendations that we have here has something to do with the findings number 2 in our report. So it is our recommendation to have a better forecasting, which in turn reduce and also integrating the energy efficiency, which in turn will reduce the forecasting of the needed capacity, because with an overbuilt overcapacity, then there is a big potential for the stranded assets. And this investment actually could be allocated for something else. The next recommendation from us is to review the proposal for the new coal-fired power plants currently in the PTL, and also to assess the role of pumped hydro energy storage, battery, etc. Because as we see from the insights number 3, from our simulation, it is obvious that wind and power will play a big role if we want to increase the shares of renewables in the Java, Bali, and Sumatra power system. And of course, having an energy storage will also help in making it possible. Recommendation number 5 from us has something to do with the regulation. This is what I mentioned before about the regulation. We used to have FET in Indonesia, but it was canceled in July 2016. Our recommendation for Indonesian right now, as the Indonesian renewable market is still at the infant stage, or very early stage, it is important to reintroduce the FET, or the feed-in tariff, at least for the next few years, while the government at the same time preparing to implement the new reverse auction for utility scale projects, so that in the end we will have a better price from the renewables. And the last two recommendations if I can sum it up, it means that it is important to have a clear plan, installation target of the renewables from the government, and a timetable that has to be announced to the investor to ensure transparency and also to manage the investor expectation. And from the study result as well, we can see that instead of 12.5% of renewables in the next 10 years, it is possible actually to have it until 31 or even 43% of renewables in the Java, Bali, and Sumatra system. In the end, I would like to share some latest, some latest update. As I mentioned earlier, currently we have RUPTL 2019 and 2028 that was released February 2019 last year. Supposedly we have the new RUPTL by early this year, either February or March, but we haven't had one. We do not know how the new RUPTL would look like or how the shares of renewables would look like. But it is in our expectation, in our hoping that we will have more renewables and there will be no coal-fired power plants in this new RUPTL, because this study, we presented this study also to PLN, to Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in Indonesia last year with this hope in mind, that more renewables will be accommodated into the planning and less power and less fossil fuels. The next update that we have is the policy to phase out old fossil fuel power plants, namely diesel, coal, and combined cycle, with a total combined capacity reaching 13 gigawatts. And then we also have a plan, a 35 gigawatt plan in Indonesia, that once this is finished, because mostly of these 35 gigawatt are coal-fired power plants. So after this program is finished, the government said that they will focus on building more renewables. And then the last update that we have is in response to the COVID-19 situation right now in Indonesia. The government currently providing free electricity. So for household with the installed capacity 450 volt ampere, and give a 50% discount for the household, subsidized household with the installed capacity of 900 volt ampere. Here's, I would like to share with you some of our publication and also upcoming publication. The first publication, we call it Indonesian Clean Energy Outlook, or IESR, that we published December last year, in December 2019. So IESR basically looked at the clean energy development in 2019 and give outlook of how it looks like in 2020. And then we also have a study on the levelized cost of electricity in Indonesia. Both can be found in IESR website and can be downloaded for free. Next, there are two upcoming studies. The first study is 100% renewables in Indonesia. This is a joint study between IESR, Agora, Energiewende, and also Lund University from Finland. In this study, basically, we want to see how, if we want to electrify Indonesia 100% from renewables. So it's not just Java, Bali, and Sumatra, but the whole country. And instead of 31 or 43%, we want to try to achieve 100%. This is still ongoing, and we hope to have the result in 1 or 2 months. And the last research that we are currently conducting is we will use National Energy Plan, or RUEN, as the basis to see alternative scenarios. Instead of having 23% shares of renewables in the primary energy mix, and we have more. So this is the study that we conducted as well, and also hopefully will be released soon. Thank you for your kind attention. That's all.
Okay, so I will just finish the, right, exactly, this is what I wanted. This, exactly, I want you to be able to see us all. Okay, before we jump into the Q&A session, we've already received several ones. If you still have a question, do not refrain from putting them into the Q&A window. So we can address them if time allows. We have another 20 minutes to go into the Q&A session, and I would hand over to Janne, who was busy dealing with those whilst you were watching the presentation.
Yes, already thanks for your questions, and we try to get to as many as possible now. So I would like to start with a question from Alberto Dalla Riva about the data used in the study. What sources do you use for the renewable energy capital cost, and what for interprovincial transmission capacity?
Okay, I think I will answer that question. So one is about the source of the data on the technology costs. So basically, there are several public technology costs catalog that's available for Indonesia. One is from Danish Energy Agency with cooperation, in cooperation with the National Energy Council of Indonesia. So we took this one as the basis, one of the bases of our technology costs, because it is something that, you know, agreed upon by the Indonesian Energy Council, as well as looking at global technology cost development. And in addition to this cost, we also use and compare the numbers with Bloomberg New Energy Finance, as well as some surveys that IESR do to some developers. And result of this, we have the table, I think, online in IESR website. So if you are interested to see what numbers we are using for our modeling exercise, then you can easily look at the numbers and see if it's, you know, in line with what you have in mind, or it's actually very far away. But we normally always also do consultation as well when we do studies with stakeholders. And I think there's another question of transmission capacity, right, Jana?
Yes. What does it mean for the interprovincial transmission capacity, or what were your assumptions?
Yeah, I think we tried to get some data which are open and public for this one. It's very difficult. It's a challenging task to find open data of power system in Indonesia. So we have some assumptions that we use in consultation with some people from PLN and also the MEMR, the Minister of Energy. And I think this is also available in the technical report of which is available in IESR website. We can also send you the Excel sheet of that. And we also look at RUTTL of what is actually the plan to improve the transmission line and the connection capacity. I think Agus maybe would like to add more onto this.
Yeah, thank you, Mentari. Actually, the answer is really good, because if you see into RUTTL that we have, we can see actually the planned transmission and also the planned distribution grid. So most of our data for transmission capacity, we got it from this RUTTL as well. I just want to add that.
Okay, so yeah, we have a lot of questions coming up, so let's move forward. We have a question from David Zilali. Last year, production costs of PLN was $79 per megawatt hour. Do you have any information? What will be the projected generation cost? Anyone? Or is that something to follow up?
I will try to step in. Maybe Egi can add later on. So basically, in calculating the generation cost, we will need the data that is used by PLN. As of the last year production cost of $79 per megawatt hour, we also need to understand basically what kind of power plant mix that the PLN used to use this to have this data projection. So we cannot really project it as of right now. What is the projection generation cost next year with our current data? Because we only use RUPTL 2018, as our basis. So we need to update first the RUPTL, and then maybe we can do the projection.
Okay, we also have some questions about the feasibility of Indonesian renewable goals. Try to find them now. There are so many questions. Where was it? Oh, I think I lost it. Also, we have many questions about what if you got any governmental feedback on your study. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that. Did you receive response from relevant governmental stakeholders on the outcomes of your study and recommendations from the study, and where they also consulted during the study, such in your scenarios and everything? Let's start with that.
I will try to start first. We got several feedbacks from the government and from the PLN as well. One feedback I could share and has been taken into consideration by PLN, I would say, is, and the government, that they look and understand that the demand projection in the RPTL has always been over. So I think it is now, right now they are trying to do a more moderate demand projection growth, as we recommend also in this study, so that they will not have overbuilt the power plant capacity, for example.
So there's one question for Mentari from Rizal Fernandi. In the study, you show coal power generation can be used to compensate the intermittent power of solar and wind. He doesn't think so, that it is applicable. Do you also do the assessment of technology to implement the deployment of solar and wind?
Oh, thank you for the question. Do we also, I mean, in terms of technicality, because we are doing a modeling exercise here with some set of assumptions, and technically, at least from the granularity level that we are doing in our analysis, which is hourly time steps, we also use unit commitment model, where, you know, it basically means you cannot just switch off the coal power plant or gas power plant the next hour when the solar and wind is, you know, 100% generation. So we take this into account with, I mentioned, I think, the assumption of 0.5% to 1% of the nameplate capacity, so they can go around this percentage of their the capacity of the power plant. And using these as assumption, which I think is one, is a globally accepted assumption, and consulting with Indonesian stakeholders, this is also a number that is accepted. It is possible in this technical sense. I guess the question is more about, is it something flexible? Is it something possible in financially wise, especially if there's already, you know, take or pay contract, etc. this is a much more difficult question to answer, but technically it's possible. And do we also assess technology to implement the deployment of solar and wind? Do you mean about other flexibility options like storage or something like that? And if this is, I mean, what you have in mind, we are not yet taking into account solar battery storage, for example, and pump hydro as flexibility options to compensate the solar and wind. And this is something that obviously we would really like to do to analyze in a more, you know, detailed sense. And yeah, I hope that's answer your question.
Well, maybe a follow-up question for that from Randi Christiansen. You mentioned hydro in days of low sun and wind. Do you talk about hydro that is already been developed, or do you talk about potential hydro?
It's both of hydro that is already developed as well as hydro that is expected to be built in the RUPTL plan. So we are not installing beyond what is planned in RUPTL.
Okay, then there is a very great question, expanding question, but maybe you can have a few words on that. That Indonesia is one of the major coal exporters in the world, and how do you think this major revenue stream from the country is not a barrier to the renewables development?
So I will try to jump in. Yes, of course, that's the challenge. I think the main challenge how we transition from the fossil fuel based through renewables. As coal, we have still quite a significant amount of coal reserve, and the coal export in the last 5 years is increasing as well. So that's one of the main challenges. But we see that for the upcoming years, the economics of renewables will be more likely decreasing. So by market, we expected that in the next 5 years, the renewables cost will be declining quite significant. So we suggest that the coal industry should be prepare the market transformation, the business transformation. So that's one of our suggestion in the upcoming study on the energy transition and in its implication to coal industry. So you will be release this paper or this study soon to comprehensively answer your questions. Just follow the IESR news or channels at the moment. So that's my prompt. Maybe I would like to have some additional info on this.
No, anything. Because I think you have elaborated quite deeply. Plus, I think it could be answered more deeply with the study that we are going to publish as well.
So before I choose another question, is there something you would like to particular answer from the many questions that are left, Egi, Mentari, or Agus? Then please let me know.
Okay, so I've been answering and reading quite a question about why did we focus only in Java, Bali, and Sumatra, and not taking, for example, Kalimantan, because as we know, Indonesian capital will be moved to Kalimantan, East Kalimantan in particular. So when we did this study, 2017-2018, first at that time, we haven't got the information about the capital that will be moved to Kalimantan. And also, at that time, we used RPTL 2018, where we see that the most of the electricity demand basically came from Java, Bali, and Sumatra. That is why at that time we decided, okay, we will focus on these 3 islands. However, as I mentioned before, we currently are doing a more elaborate simulation in powering the whole Indonesian with 100% renewables. So I think the issue or the concern that some of you have raised here hopefully can be solved or can be answered with the study that we are currently doing.
Any other questions you think are important and haven't been answered yet? Otherwise, I would suggest one more.
Maybe I would like to address the question from Dwiki regarding the nuclear as a substitute or options to in the energy transition process. I think if we look at the percentage of electricity generated by the nuclear power plants from 1996 to 2018, as I only get this range of data, there's a significant or probably in cases 7% drop in shares, and then some of the nuclear power plants also being closed or phased out in the pipeline. So from currently or at least until the end of January, there are 186 nuclear power plants closed permanently, and 27 nuclear power plants also not renewal, not extending their lifetime, and 96 construction is being stopped. So I think our position is not into nuclear. Maybe Mentari also have some insights from why Germany also phase out the nuclear power plant. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Egy. I think, why Germany phase out nuclear is another longer discussion, which of course something very interesting also for the Indonesian audience who has not yet have any nuclear in the energy mix. But also from a cost perspective, for example, nuclear has high costs compared to others. It's around, I think when we look at the global number, maybe around 6,000 euro per megawatt of capex, while other technology like wind and solar has lower, around maybe 1,000 euro or even less. And also, I think looking at the development, as Egy has mentioned, and also in Germany, there's a risk as well that needs to be considered before installing nuclear power plant. And we are well aware of the environmental advantage of nuclear, but the risk, for example, of the waste of nuclear and radioactive waste, where this is going to be stored, this is still an ongoing discussion in Germany, I think. And as Indonesia is still a growing demand, there are still other energy options that we as Indonesia can choose. So why choosing something else that has higher risk? I think maybe that's how I see it.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately it's the time is over now, and so thank you very much for your questions. If you have any urgent questions, please post or send them to webinar@agora-energiewende.de. I posted that before in the chat. So let us know if you have any unanswered questions. And so that was my part, and I will hand back to Nicola. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to all of you, Mentari, Agus, Egy, for the presentation and answering the questions, and also to you, Janne, for flicking through them. I think we had some 40 or something altogether. It started slowly, and then they sort of came in one second after the other. Thanks for joining our presentation today. We will put the recording of the webinar in case you want to review it or show it to someone else, hopefully next week. And also, we will continue with this webinar series. We have 2 more webinars upcoming next week, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. Check our website or subscribe to our newsletter. That's actually the easiest way to be kept up to date all the time. After that, we will have a break for 1 week, and then we will start again in May on the 12th, I believe. I would also like to inform you about an event that IESR is actually going to host, and I will quickly share the screen with you so you can see it. There will be an energy transition in millennials perspective talk next week, Tuesday, 28th of April. And Janne, I think, will post the link to that event also in the chat. So if anyone's interested on the millennials perspective, which we should all be actually, go there, tune in. I will stop sharing. Right, that's so much for today. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay home, and see you next time. Bye.